Welcome to Week 2, Legal and Ethical Issues in Computer Security. The main objectives this week is to look at the ethical and legal issues and to understand how they're an integral portion of security and of what we do as security professionals. Another big part is to get you thinking about how you feel about issues that we're likely to encounter, both negative and positive encounters. Lastly, to introduce you to the alphabet soup of regulations that may affect us and how we do our jobs. So the question, should schools offer a course that teach students how to hack a system? So normally what I do is we break out 3-5 minutes in discussion groups and I try to get people who contribute to this. I'm currently offering an ethical hacking course for one of the classes that I teach. And the school administration actually brought up, do we want to show students how to attack us? And then what liability is there? And how vulnerable is our school network? And did we even really want to discuss that? And it's interesting that we get this because the schools normally, from the administration portion, don't want us to teach hacking courses. But from faculty and curriculum, they do. Because these are important information that we need to know, that we should know. For computer security in general, we need to understand how people are getting into our systems. We need to understand the mindset so that we can better protect them. Not only that, we need to be able to run these penetration testing on our systems, on our network, so that we can make sure that they are covered. Here in the state of Nevada, part of the PCI DSS, Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, we discussed about how you have to have a qualified auditor come in, and they have to check, they have to test your network to verify that nothing can get in. And that's actually what we're talking about here. When we're able to teach students how to break in, to hack into systems ethically, then there's a job market for that. But a big part of this is that ethical portion. Do they have the right to do so? Do they have the permission to do so? And that's the key thing. Sadly, we weren't able to break up into discussions, but one of the big things is most people, there will not be a consensus. And normally the major topics that support individual positions is it legal? Is it unethical? Is it negligent? Should I be liable to students that use their knowledge to do something bad? If I teach you how to bypass certain types of security, should I be liable? Should I show students how to break into Wi-Fi? Because that's been a huge thing. Actually, I just attended a conference where that was one of the major topics. We were shown how to break into wireless encryption, WPA, WPA2, and we were asked, is this appropriate? And honestly, I think it is. It's important for us to know how easy it is to be done. That way we can see how it's being done. We can kind of see what that type of attack would look like. That way from the protection side, we can recognize it and mitigate that risk of that type of an attack. But you first have to understand what that type of attack looks like. So general question normally is, what is the difference between legal issues and an ethical issue? How do you determine which it is? Should you care which it is? And what percentage of your time would you guess that you'll be spending dealing with ethical versus legal issues? One of the things that I have encountered is, when I'm doing IT work, sometimes the line of legal versus ethical gets very blurred. Can you install software on a business computer? And to help make sure that you do so legally, there is an end-user license agreement, an EULA. Part of the problem is sometimes that does not always answer the question of if you're allowed to install it or not. Then it becomes more of an ethical issue, because you can read the license agreement, you can see that they're going for an underlying tone, and you could see part of that tone. If it ever got to the point where you could see that tone, but it's not clearly written, it's still very gray, what happens if you do it? And those are some of the issues that we're going to have to be faced with. I have a few examples that I want to bring up, but we have to talk about a few things first. A legal issue sometimes have a definite answer, yes or no. It's a determination is made normally by others, not by ourselves. There are laws, there are ordinances, there are regulations, there are torts, things that our society, our culture has put into place. Ethical issues sometimes have a definite answer, but most of the time they are determined by us, because our own morality, our own moral being may differ from person to person. The law doesn't make it right. Being right doesn't make it legal. Normally this is where you could bring up the law says that corporate punishment is okay in certain offenses. Should it be right if we kill someone? A murderer kills 5 people. Should we sentence him to death? He killed. Should we then kill him? The law says, the law in certain states says yes. But does that make it right? By killing him, does that fix anything? Does it make it right? Another thing is, sometimes stealing food, for example. It may be the right thing to do if you have a starving family and you have no money and there is no hope for any type of income or way to survive. Maybe stealing was your only option. That might be the right item to do, but is it legal to do so? A great example of this. So we have construction near my house, and the construction closed down north and south traffic, so you can only go east and west. That's it. And they stuck a stoplight in the middle. Even though there is no north-south traffic, we get a red light every now and again. And sometimes that red light stays red for 3 or 4 minutes, waiting for that north-south traffic to go. But it's all closed off. It cannot go because all of those roadways are closed. Is it right to run that red light? How long would you wait at that red light before you run it? Because there is no traffic, most people feel that they can run it. But does it make it legal? You're still running a red light. Even though there is no cross traffic, you're still running a red light. And so, is that okay? So let's look at some ethical issues, and let's look at the definition of ethical. It's an adjective pertaining to or dealing with morals or the principles of morality, pertaining to the right and wrong in conduct, in accordance with the rules or standards for right of conduct or practice, especially the standard of a profession. Meaning, right or wrong. Is it moral to do so? Is it the right conduct for you as a professional? Examples. Should companies collect and or sell customer data? Maybe let's add a little bit more to that. Sell customer data with or without their permission. Should IT specialists monitor and report employee computer use? This has been a huge topic because we actually just rated and installed tracking and monitoring software for about 500 computers so that the system would monitor and report what the employees were doing on their computer, how often they spent on what application, what websites they were going to, how much time they were spending on it, how much time was their computer being idle. And every day the system would actually then file a report with a specific person, and would also do a graphical display or a dashboard to an administrator. That way they could see where their employees are using those technology assets. Another example, should you act on information you inadvertently seen due to having administrator privileges? Things that you were not supposed to see, but you accidentally seen because of the privileges that you had. Should you be able to act on those? I mean, you have the privileges for a reason, but you weren't supposed to see that material, so should you be allowed to act on it? That's a normal, huge dilemma. Consider your views on ethical behavior. In every job situation, we're eventually faced with an ethical dilemma. How would you react? So, normally what I bring up, I had to install monitoring software for a public library system. And part of that monitoring software was any computer in a lab environment you would monitor. So part of our job scope was to train the staff on how to use this. And we watched a family walk in, a husband, a wife, and 2 little girls. And we watched the father walk to the computer lab. The rest of the family split up. And so we said, that would be a really good example. So we waited till the guy sat down, we waited a few minutes, he was on the computer, and we flicked over to monitor his screen so we could see what he was looking at. And lo and behold, to most of our shock, he was actually looking at incest literotica. And I mean, it blew my mind. I didn't even know how to react. But one of the technicians was like, we need to report him. And then I had to step back, and it's like, whoa, wait. It's a public library. He is not doing anything illegal. While we may disagree with it, it's not illegal. And we need to file a report, yes, but we have to be careful on the actions we take, because, again, it is not illegal. We may find it unethical for what he's doing, especially because we watched him walk in with his family and 2 young girls. It doesn't mean that it's wrong, or it doesn't mean that it's illegal. Again, wrong is subjective. We may have viewed it as wrong, which, I mean, don't get me wrong, I did. I mean, it was wrong, at least in my eyes. But in the law eyes, he wasn't doing anything wrong. And so he was free to do what he wanted. So that's one of the big issues when we start thinking about our technology. That's something that we may have to face. And it's sad, but I've encountered that several times. Not that same situation, but a very similar ethical dilemma. Because it keeps popping up. My morals, my views, versus what other people may view is appropriate. So a question I've been asked is, are our ethics contextual? Meaning, are they unchanging or are they contextual? Folks know that downloading music or software that they don't own is illegal, but we do it anyway. Because we believe that it doesn't hurt the owner of the actual intellectual property. Intellectual property, whether it be movie, music, games, TV shows, whatever. It's easy to pirate. It's easy to download. We're anonymous. We do it. But doesn't make it right. Just because everyone is doing it, just because it's easy, does it make it somewhat better? And that's one of the questions we have to ask ourselves. You have the expectations of privacy. We have lockers, email, etc. But what happens when we get to the point where those lockers, those emails, our cloud services, our cloud storage, start opening up? Our phone is another great example. How many of us would like to see the content of our phones shown to everyone that we know? Our private photos, our private messages. Do we do things, not would we do things, but do we do things that if it was brought to the light of day that we would not own up to? And that's one of the big things that I mean when I say ethics and how contextual they are. Are our morals the same whether we're being reviewed or not? Is our sense of right and wrong the same in the dark as it is in the light? And that's an important question for us to answer. Somehow legal doctrine must codify these complicated and contextual courses of action. That's another big thing. Would we do the same things that we do in front of others? Would we be willing to actually stand up and take ownership of them? And that's a big concern. So let's talk about the framework of ethics. What motivates us to view issues in a certain way? How do they direct us, or how do we direct them? How do those issues affect us? Do they affect us? Those are just some of the questions. Are we inconsistent the way that we approach all of the ethical issues? Is it okay to pirate music because everyone is doing it, versus us not pirating TV or movies because that's wrong? We're still, in both instances, stealing intellectual property, but is one less than the other? How do we resolve conflict with these? So normally there's two main basic camps for these: consequent-based and rule-based. And what I mean by that is, how do we resolve some of these issues? First, let's look at consequence-based. Priority is given to choices that lead to a good outcome, or a better consequence. The outcome outweighs the method. Egoism is the right choice benefits self. Utilitarian, the right choice benefits the interest of others. So those are two major concepts here for our consequent-based ethics. And consequence doesn't always have to have a negative undertone. So keep that in mind. Rule-based. Priority is given to the following rules without undue regard to the outcome. Rules are often thought to codify principles like truthfulness, right to freedom, and justice, i.e., stress validity to a sense of duty and principle. Never tell a lie, for example. It basically exists for the benefit of society and should be followed by all. Meaning, we do this regardless of outcome. We do the path because it is the right way. Normally with people, when you talk about time travel, if you had the option to go back to kill Hitler when he was a child, would you? And normally, that's an important question, because if we're doing rule-based, regardless of the outcome, you look at the actions that lead to the outcome. With consequent-based, you only focus at the end result. And if we were to go back to kill Hitler when he was a child, consequent-based, it may show better numbers. Hitler never would have came to power, the Holocaust never would have happened. None of the things that we think of when we think of the axis of evil would have ever occurred. Or maybe something worse might have happened. But if we look at it rule-based, a young Hitler never did any of those things, so we wouldn't be able to look at the outcome of him being killed would be. We'd have to see that in that case we'd be murdering a child, regardless of what that child would become. So let's look at another scenario. Student copies answers on a final exam, and per our policy, I confront the student with evidence. My perspective was the right thing to do is to tell the truth regardless of the consequence. The student's perspective is, if I confess now, will the penalty be less than if I roll the dice with the university judicial council and am found guilty? Those are two big things that are very important. A high school student in the state of Washington not too long ago was recently caught cheating. She was given an F on the exam, and that F resulted in her getting a B in the course. After that, she took the school, the instructor, and the school district to court because her being caught cheating actually hampered her education goals. Because she received a B in that course, she didn't get the correct GPA that would have allowed her to enter into a better college. And the sad part about this was the judge heard it. Like it actually was brought in front of a judge. But should have ever gone that far. The student was caught cheating. Regardless of what the actions were, the student was in the wrong. But she took the 0 on the exam because of that resulted for a B, and then she turned around and sued the school and the school district because she was caught doing something wrong. Ethics. If she was ethical, would that have even been an idea in her mind? So time to work again. You're a security officer for a research network at a large Florida university. You suspect that students are using some type of peer-to-peer application to upload copyrighted material, music, videos, stuff like that. It violates federal law. What should you do about it? Where is your comfort level? Some of the options is you do nothing until a suspicion is brought forward. You do some type of bandwidth limiting to peer-to-peer packets. You filter peer-to-peer just outright, though if that's not in the policies, you might get in trouble. You actively monitor the network looking for the peer-to-peer, or you read the local news groups and follow leads where peer-to-peer is discussed. What could you do? Consequent-based is egoism, again, the right choice benefits itself. Authoritarian is, again, the right choice benefits the interests of others, versus R, rule-based. Pluralism stresses fidelity to a sense of duty and principle, again, you never lie, or are underlining rule-based. Rules exist to benefit of society and should be followed. So going back to the example of should you monitor peer-to-peer, you'd have to look at the policies. Is peer-to-peer allowed? If it's not allowed, then should you investigate further. But at the same time, how did you know that peer-to-peer is going on? You have to look at outcome or the actions that led to the outcome. Consequence versus rule-based. That's an example that we're going to keep coming back to. So now let's go ahead and move on to something a little bit more lighter. Let's talk about some privacy issues. Many ethical issues, and that also includes some legal issues, insecurity seems to be in the domain of individual rights to privacy versus the greater good for a larger entity. Should we allow the government to tap cell phones to help prevent terrorist attacks? Right there sums it up. Should we give up our individual rights on our cell phones so that we could fight a greater good? Or we could fight a greater battle for the greater good? If the government does listen to our cell phone conversations and our privacy is invaded, but they do catch terrorists, is it worth it? Would you be willing to give up some of your rights to protect our country? So the example that our text uses is tracking employees' computer use, crowd surveillance, maybe managing customer profiles, maybe tracking travel with national ID cards, location tracking, spamming cell phones with advertisements. We used to do this when I worked for a payday loan company. The payday loan company would send mass text to 100,000+ cell phones, even though they only get about 10% back. You know, when you're doing 100,000 mass texts, 10% is still a good chunk. So the key concept in sorting this all out is expectation of privacy. Do you have an expectation of privacy in your home? Do you have an expectation in your living room, in your kitchen, in your backyard? And this really is very subjective, because where I live in Nevada, expectation of privacy in your backyard? None. Especially if it can be viewed by the street? None. If it can be viewed by a neighbor? No expectation of privacy. If you have curtains open, again, no expectation of privacy. In your bedroom, that's slightly different. So 4 ethical issues of the informational age: privacy, accuracy, property, accessibility. Privacy is the right to individuals to control personal information on themselves, about their person. Accuracy: who is responsible for the authentication, fidelity, and accuracy of information? Because let's talk about credit, for example. How accurate is our credit? Is it accurate? That's a huge thing. Property: who owns the information about us? Who controls that access? Accessibility: what information does an organization have the right to collect? Should our ISPs collect our search results? Should they be allowed? Okay, so before we move on, think about some examples. What are some of your concerns? What are some emerging issues along this lines? Ethical issues in security aren't always very straightforward, and some ethical issues may be different depending on the people that are involved. Installing software may be a concern for one group versus another. We've been asked numerous times to install Microsoft Security Essentials for a network that has about 250 computers. It's like, but Security Essentials in your license agreement says it's only free for people with 10 computers or less. We have 250. It's illegal for us to install it. Some people wouldn't even go that far. Some people would. So this is one of the reasons why this is important, because it's becoming an issue. So, legal issue. Why do I have to know this? Are there any emerging legal requirements for the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of data? What are requirements of due process? What about liability? What about liability for not exercising best practice within security? Should I be held liable? Would you be held liable? Who's liable? Who's ultimately going to pay for this? So are we ready for all of our lovely acronyms? DMCA is digital media content. And what are some of the compliances that fall underneath there? There are a bunch of compliances: HIPAA, GLB, FERPA, the Teach Act, PCI DSS, SOX, COBIT, and there is just a lot of them. So first of all, let's look at the hierarchy. International Cybercrime Treaty, because there is an international regulation on cybercrime. Federal: FERPA, GLB, HIPAA, DMCA, the Teach Act, Patriot Act, SOX. Not so much federal, but more state is the UCITA, PCI DSS, the payment card industry. State of Nevada mandates it. What about at the organizational level? Could be the user policy or the use policy. Could also be at a vendor mandate. PCI DSS is also a vendor mandate. If you want to accept payment cards, here's the requirements for you to accept them. PCI DSS. So examples. Let's look at a few of them. International cybercrime. SOX, FERPA, HIPAA. HIPAA is Health Information Act. FERPA, that's educational records. SOX is about accountability and accounting records for publicly traded companies. What would we expect to see in information protection legislation? Normally, for the components for that legislation is the statement of what we are trying to protect, what type of the data, the attributes that need protection, confidentiality, integrity, availability, changes to the business practice that may be required, assigning accountability for protection. What about the penalties for failure? Are there any specific areas? Is there anything that we need to specifically focus on? PCI DSS deals very specifically with storage and transmission of credit card information. How can you store credit card information? How can you transmit it? These are only a few of the components, so keep that in mind. Okay, so let's look at the first International Cybercrime Treaty. Facilitates cross-border computer crime investigation. 38 nations have ratified it. The USA is not one of them. Provision, it obligates participants to outlaw computer intrusion, child pornography, commercial copyright infringement, online fraud, basic online things that we just already say no to. Participants must pass laws to support search and seizures of the email, computer records, all of that good stuff. You guys can read the slides. Ukraine was one of them, actually. Britain, France, Germany. However, opposition, open to countries with poor human rights records. Also the definition of crime. China. Copyright infringement in China. China doesn't recognize copyright or intellectual property. That's just one of their big things. SOX. SOX, it deals specifically with accountability and availability to stakeholders of accounting documents. Holds executives personally liable for many of the organizational and operational aspects of a company, meaning and including computer security, by making them pledge that the company's internal controls are adequate. Basically, you have to pledge to your stakeholders that they are adequate or you're liable. Health data. Health data is one of the big ones. That actually kind of dives right into HIPAA. Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act focuses on the confidentiality of personal medical data through standards for administrative, physical, and technical security. Became law in '96, and it just kind of, the price to meet this has gone up and up and up, but it protects all aspect of health information data, medical data, anything that deals with medical and individuals. So how does this apply to IT? If you have systems with patient data, and you either A, transmit the data, or B, allow access to the system that stores the data, then you're meeting HIPAA. And there's a technical portion of HIPAA that would be meeting. And if you transmit protection health information, you're accountable for the integrity, the authentication, the alarms, the audit trails, the entity authentication, the event reports. If you communicate with others via a network, it's the access controls, the encryption. HIPAA does not play around. They're in-depth accountability controls. It covers things like data integrity, authentication, the alarms, all of this in more detail. The big thing here is physical safeguards, administrative policies and procedures, technical security and technical security services, and mechanisms to prevent access. Basically, protection of that data. And it just goes more and more in depth. HIPAA is one of those big beasts, but if you're dealing with health information, you have to know this. I guess the biggest portion is, why do I need to worry about HIPAA? It's federal law. If you're accountable for the systems with patient data, then you ensure that protection mechanisms are in place and are working, because again, you're held liable. GLB, the Gramm-Leach-Bliley Act, again deals with finance institutions under the FTC jurisdictions. It's all significant engagements for financial organizations. That's check cashing systems, mortgage, data processing, non-bank lenders and bank lenders, real estate appraisals, ATMs, credit report agencies. All of these mandate privacy notices and opt out for sharing data with other third parties. They can opt out, they don't all necessarily have to opt out. But what are some of the basic components of GLB? Financial privacy, safeguards, and pretext rules. All of these go hand in hand with protecting end user data, financial data of our users. Some of the safeguards, I mean, that goes back to training, IS, that's storage, backups, and transmission, and the security of the transmission, the management systems. Again, all of this is outlined heavily. Next, U.S. Patriot Act. This is a whole legal, ethical, moral debate that we could have sometime. But, bottom line, it's law, and you have to know the law. Sunset December 2005, simple search warrants will gain access to stored voicemails. Title III, wiretaps not needed. Part of the Patriot Act. Government can subpoena sessions, time, and duration, can request ISP payment information. Again, all part of the Patriot Act. Is the Patriot Act legal? Is it constitutional? Is it non-constitutional? That's a whole nother debate. But our government has already laid out the rules saying that they have no problem enacting acts like this. ITSPs cannot reveal the purpose of the gathering of tangible things. Can we keep device records? Can we tap device records? These are just a few of the small things for the Patriot Act. Basically, if you see the Patriot Act coming, you get your legal team involved, because the federal government and its major Patriot Act and other acts that cover very similar things, they are pretty in-depth, and they are not friendly. FERPA. Oh, this is a big one. We are all subject to FERPA because we're all in school. FERPA is what? Well, FERPA first of all stands for Family Education Rights and Privacy Act. Basically gives parents certain rights to their child's educational records. However, it gives adult students rights to see information the institution is keeping on the student, seek amendments to record certain data, and it also deals with the consent to disclose records. If you are an adult, you can choose not to disclose records even to your parents. Then the school will not be allowed to disclose records. I had just actually gotten into a FERPA debate with a parent. They called, they pay for the student's college, and they wanted records. They wanted to see how they were doing. They wanted very specific information. And my response was, I'm sorry, part of this records, whether it be personal information, enrollment records, grades, schedules, I cannot disclose this without the student's consent. and they brought up, well, I pay for their tuition, and I pay for all of this, I pay for that, and this. Doesn't matter. I don't have a consent form, thus I cannot provide student records, even to parents, without the student's permission. So let's get into the implications of IT. Organizations must have policies, procedures, and mechanisms in place to protect information. That also means dealing with audit use, and also audits could also be used to demonstrate compliance with the policies and procedures. This has been a big one. How many of you are familiar with the college's acceptable use policy, or any policy in the handbook that you as a student need to know about? Most people don't know. Most people only know the policies that are governing them specifically, and even then, most people don't know. I actually just challenged a policy in a handbook for a school I work at, because the policy basically stated, if you witness a person in the parking lot of the institution being raped or sexually assaulted, if you are female, you need to run away. If you are male, you have to help. And that's what the policy stated. That's not what the policy meant, but that's what it stated. First of all, it was gender biased. Females had to run away, males had to help. But then it was also the help portion. It didn't clearly identify who you had to help. Were you helping the rapee or the raper? And I hate to use that as an example, but that's been a very common one. And when we start looking at our policies, you have to have them clearly defined, not with ambiguous wording, because wording is that important. Here's another example from the University of Maryland. In its policy of the UM to permit students to inspect their educational records regardless of the media, only valid students, only their records, read-only log access. It is the policy of UM to limit disclosure of personal identifying information from educational records unless it has students' prior written consent. It is also the policy of UM to provide students the opportunity to seek correction of their records. Also the right to file a complaint. That's part of the University of Maryland's policy on the inspection of educational records. Every student has the right. That's something that you need to know where to find our policy. Where is our policy for the disclosure of our school records? Some people don't know. Some people had no idea that this even existed. So that is something that we probably should know. How do ethical and legal issues affect us? They affect us in more ways than we realize. We don't always understand the liability that we put ourselves in when we do things. I brought up the installing illegal software, installing security essentials in a network where we don't have proper licensing. Who's liable? Who installed it? Who do you think the business would throw underneath the bus? They could easily claim, well, they didn't know any better. Thus, it was the technician who installed it who should have known better. It's their problem now. So, again, we have to think legal issues when we start thinking about the moral decisions that we make. Just because we make the right decision doesn't mean that it's the legal decision. That's it for this week. I wanted to thank you guys, and hope you guys had a great time. Thank you. Okay, so I wanted to discuss some follow-up items. One of the first things is our APA formatting and citation. That goes for both our IPs and our discussions. Remember that we have to do all of our work according to the APA manual. So if you're not sure how to do that, go online, you can type in APA formatting. If you don't want to look it up online, you can go to any of the tutorial services. We have a writing, we have a library service. They can give you additional resources on how to do APA formatting. That's important. That's not going away. In discussions, same thing. We have to be doing our citations in our discussions, because one of the big things is, for our citations, we're building off of other people's works. So it's a way for us to verify what we're claiming is supported by the literature. So when I say something at the sky is blue, you can take my word for it, or if I provide a citation, you can take an expert's word for it, and then I build off of that. So it just kind of increases your credibility. We should be at least citing in every post, or as much as possible, because again, we're trying to link what we've done back to the literature. Same thing in our IPs. Every paragraph should be tied to a source. Every paragraph is an idea, and every idea we need to have support within the literature. And I know at this level it's not that big of an issue, but you want to get in the habit of doing that, so when you start doing higher level work, it's second nature. Also, length. We don't need posts that are great job. I mean, don't get me wrong, it does add to it, but when I start grading for posts, I'm not doing full credit for those that have 3 posts and 2 of them are great jobs. I don't count the great jobs as a post. For our discussion board, I'm looking for 3 solid responses with citations. For our papers, I'm looking for 3 pages of content with citations. So what I mean by content is, that's 3 papers on topic. That's not a cover page, that's not your reference page, that's 3 content pages. 2 if you're really good, but I'm really looking for 3 if you're doing diagrams. Diagrams totally are okay, as long as you're doing them within APA formatting. Lastly, grading. Again, I grade heavily off of attempt, like if you're putting an effort into it. Like if you did 2 pages and you did a few citations, and I could see that you were making an effort, I'll meet you. But if you post once, or you did a page and a half with 1 citation, you know, that really isn't you making an effort. If you get stuck, don't get me wrong, some people a page is a lot. If you get stuck, you have plenty of resources to bolster up your paper. You can contact me, I'll help you. If you don't want to contact me, we have a writing center, we have a tutorial center, we have plenty of help for you to get. If you need tutoring, there's a lot of tutoring out there. And again, provided from the school. All you have to do is say something. For our tutorial lab, we have tutorial services for SQL, we have tutorial services for database, we have tutorial services for math, English, writing, research, library services. I mean, we have a great amount of tutorial services. And if we don't offer tutoring in a specific area, you can ask for it specifically, and they will find tutors for you. So you could not get tutoring, because you can. If you ask for help, the school will get it. If you cannot get it from the school, there's other help. I will sit down with you. I will do as much as I can with you if you need one-on-one. If you need tutoring and you don't get tutoring, that's not a failure on my part. That's not a failure on the school's part. That's only a failure on your part, because there's plenty of opportunities there. You have my number, you have my email, you have 2 emails from me, you have my cell phone number, you have plenty of ways to get a hold of me if you need help. And again, if you don't capitalize on help and you need help, that's on you. That's on you. Okay, there's plenty of help out there. All you have to do is say something. Thank you.